Hi, this is Sarit Switzer, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast, a podcast devoted to the teachings of Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi as recorded in his most famous work, the Tanya. My hope for this show is to make these teachings accessible and relatable to the average person, regardless of prior Jewish education or affiliation. The episodes follow the prescribed daily study portions and are meant to serve as practical lessons in how to live your life as your true self and develop an authentic and powerful relationship with your Creator. I have personally experienced the effects the study of this work has had on me, and I'm excited to share what I can of this knowledge with you. So please join me on this journey of learning, self-growth, and connection with your source. Hi, and welcome to the It Is Taught podcast. This is episode 668 for the 6th of Tishrei in a regular year. So we've been discussing ex nihilo creation. Yesterday we had a whole episode about ex nihilo creation, about why it is that ex nihilo creation, otherwise known as creation something from nothing, is really the only type of creation that we can deem true creation. And we talked about the various ways which creation something from nothing is distinct from creation something from something, is specifically in regards to our perception, the perception of us created beings. So if you haven't already, please go back and listen to yesterday's episode so you're up to speed with all of that, or you can go back and review it as well. So the idea of creation ex nihilo, this something from nothing creation, it's fascinating, it's miraculous, it's amazing, it's beyond comprehension. It's not something we can relate to because none of us can do it as humans. We human beings can only create something from something. I mean, the one way that maybe we can kind of see some kind of semblance of it is in terms of planting, gardening, and also in terms of giving birth to children. Those are two things that kind of can give us a little sense of creation something from nothing here in our world that we can participate in. But even then, we don't really understand how it happens. We can talk about the physical mechanisms behind it all, but it doesn't really make sense. It's not as easy to follow as another type of more something from something creation. Like we talked about, creating a table out of wood. You take the wood, you form it into a certain way, whatever. It's much more obvious how the table comes about from the wood. When it comes to creation something from nothing, it's a lot harder to see that the origin, to see the cause, to see where it's coming from. Nevertheless, in today's episode, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be talking about that a little bit. We're going to be talking about the mechanisms whereby creation something from nothing happens. And as we'll see in this occurrence of something from nothing creation, the main driving force behind it all, at least, in terms of the mechanics that God uses to bring it about, because ultimately it comes from God, right, is something called vessels, kalim in Hebrew. So to introduce the topic today and what we're going to discuss in terms of the vessels and how vessels really play a very prominent role in terms of creation ex nihilo, in terms of creation something from nothing, I think it could be useful to give a little bit of an introduction to explain the difference between vessels and light, which are kind of like the two energy forces that we see come up a lot in Chassidus and in Kabbalah, that Hashem kind of uses vessels and Hashem uses light in different ways. Everything is made up of vessels and light. And at first glance, one might think that light kind of sounds a lot shinier. It sounds a lot more luminous. It sounds like it would be more important than the vessels. The vessels just kind of contain the light. So one might think, in this type of creation, something from nothing, we would think that if anything, the light might be the most powerful force. But really we see that the vessels play a more predominant role. So a way to understand this that I think would be a good introduction is I'm going to give you guys two scenarios one involving light and one involving vessels, and we'll see the difference. So scenario number one is where, let's say you walk into a room that has a window and you see that there is some light that's coming in flashing on, like there's like sort of like this ray of light that's coming in. So let's say that, the room otherwise is not very well lit. Let's say it doesn't have like an overhead light or something like that, but yet you see this light coming in from the window. And then, at first glance, you're like, is that sunlight? What is that? Where's that light coming from? So you can easily check. You go to the window and you see the light, and lo and behold, you see that there's somebody in the other room that's shining a light bulb into that room. And you're like, oh, that's where the light's coming from. So light is very luminous. But it's also really connected to its source at every given moment, so that when we see light, just like in that situation in the room, we can look at that light and we can trace it back, assuming that we have the tools to do so, that it's not too far away or whatever. But like basically it is possible to trace the light back to its origin of where the light is coming from, to the ma'or, we call it in Hebrew, to the illuminator. The sunlight comes from the sun, and so forth. Now, what about scenario number 2? So scenario number 2 is you walk into a room. Let's say it's the same room, and instead of there being light shining in from the window, there's actually a flashlight on the ground. So you're like, oh, interesting, flashlight, right? Where did this flashlight come from? You don't know. Is there anybody around? Maybe yes, maybe no. Did they put it there? Who put it there? How long has it been there for? Where did it come from? Maybe it will have some kind of label on it that can tell you the company that it came from. But let's say it doesn't have a label. You really have very little knowledge about this flashlight. The flashlight in this case is a vessel. And while the vessel still definitely does have an origin, like we do know that the flashlight came from somewhere, someone made the flashlight, someone put it in the room, we don't see the origin of this flashlight so obviously in the same way that we saw the origin of the light. So this is how it works spiritually speaking when it comes to lights and vessels, that lights are a lot more overtly connected to their source in this kind of like overt way, versus vessels are not. Vessels, there's something that is kind of hidden about them. They conceal their origin, which is, a deficit in a certain way, but actually in terms of the creation of ex nihilo, of something from nothing, this is exactly what we want, because this is what we're going for. We're going for this creation of something that has a semblance of being something of its own right, of having its own independent existence, which is the realm of vessel more than it is light. But yet, nevertheless, as we'll see in today's Tanya, the source of everything really is light. So the source of the vessels really is light as well. It's just not overt in the same way. So let's get into the text and let's see how the Alter Rebbe breaks all of this down. We are getting into like some of the more esoteric parts of the Tanya. So if you're not fully, grasping every single concept that comes up in these texts, that's totally fine. I'm not either, full disclosure. These are ideas. Again, we're going to be describing the mechanisms behind ex nihilo creation, behind something for nothing creation. That doesn't mean that we're going to come to really grasp it or understand it really. It's just to kind of give us like a little peek, into the behind the scenes of what's going on. So for context, we're in Epistle 20 of Iggeres HaKodesh, and we're going to be continuing with this epistle today. And so here we go. So the Alter Rebbe begins, and he says that at the beginning of the somethingness, the beginning of the created something, and like the head of it, the start of it all, is from the vessels of the 10 spheros of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, as well as the lights of the Ruach and the Nefesh. So, okay, let's break this down. So once again, there are 4 general worlds, and the 3 lower worlds are the worlds of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. Bria is like the beginning of this creation. This is where we start to see that there's something other than God, because in the world of Atzilus is the world of emanation. Everything is nullified to God. It's like the sunlight within the sun itself. So the vessels that are found within the 3 lower spheres, this is the origin of this creation of somethingness, something other than God, as well as the lights that are found within there, specifically on the levels of Nefesh and Ruach, which are the 2 lower aspects of the soul level. So it's like, so again, every world, not only does it have 10 spheros, it also has different levels of soul within it. And the 2 lower levels of soul is the Nefesh and Ruach. And now, so we say that it's the source is the vessel, these vessels within these three worlds, as well as these two lower levels of souls. And these two things, the vessels that we're talking about, as well as the two levels of souls, where did they come from? They came from the level of neshama, which is a higher level of soul, of the 10 spheros in Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which is total godliness. And so where can this be traced back to? So we're going like up in a map. You might want to take notes here and see like on a map of where we're going back to. So it's like on the bottom of the totem pole here, we see that we have the vessels within the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, as well as the two lower levels of the soul, the ruach and the nefesh. And the source of those is in the neshama of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, which this neshama of the 10 spheres of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya is total godliness. Why is it total godliness? Because the source of that is in the 30 vessels of Malchus of Atzilus. So, once you hear that word Atzilus, that's when you know we're talking total godliness, nullification to the source, all of that. But even within Atzilus, there are different levels of emanations. So within Atzilus, you also have the 10 spheres. So the lowest of all the 10 spheres is Malchus, right? And just like in all the other worlds, we know that there's light and vessels. In Atzilus too, there are vessels. And within the realm of vessels, this is kind of like a side note to know, there's actually 3 aspects of vessels. I know this is very technical, but just bear with me as best as you can. So within the vessels, we have what are called the external vessels, the internal vessels, and the intermediate vessels. So each one of the spheros, each one of the 10 spheros has an aspect of light to it, and it also has an aspect of vessel, and there are 3 subcategories of vessels. So if we have 10 spheros times 3, that equals 30, which is why there are 30 vessels in total within each world. So now specifically we're honing in on the 30 vessels of Malchus, which is the lowest sphere, in the world of Atzilus, which is the highest of all worlds. And that is the source of the neshama of the lower worlds, Bria, Yetzirah, Asiya, which is the source of the vessels of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya, as well as the 2 lower souls of Bria, Yetzirah, and Asiya. That's where we're up to so far. Okay, so now we're in the world of Atzilus. And within the world of Atzilus, the Alter Rebbe is now going to describe what is it within the world of Atzilus that the origin of this creation of something from nothing comes from. We see that there's actually a source within the world of Atzilus itself that this creation of something from nothing comes from. So it does all get traced back to this place. And what happens there? So in the world of Atzilus, as well as in all the worlds really, there's something called the Heichalos. This is the chambers. The chambers are this like very external level of within which the angels are found. So the angels are like this manifestation, this external manifestation of godliness that's like very, very external. It's really is like something distinct from God. And so these chambers, how do they come into being? These chambers come into being from the external aspect of the vessels of the 10 spheres. So remember we talked about how the vessels have 3 aspects. There's the internal aspect, the external aspect, and the intermediate aspect. So the external aspect of the vessels of the spheres in Atzilus create, which are total godliness, because we're in the world of Atzilus, but these create the Heichalos, the chambers within Atzilus. And within this category, within this realm of the Heichalos, then we find vested within there the aspect of the Igulim of the 10 spheros. What's the aspect of the Igulim? This is the aspect of Igulim means circles, so it's the aspect of the encompassing light within the 10 spheros, as well as the bodies of the angels of Atzilus, which are also an aspect of something. Like when we say angel, it's something that's not God, right? As it is written, and the Alter Rebbe here quotes a verse from a citation from Iyov, chapter 4, verse 18, Uvemelachav yasim tahala, and his angels he charges with deficiency. So meaning to say there's something deficient about the angels. So meaning that they're not total godliness, because they are not totally in a state of nullification and a way of a cause to its an effect to its cause, like an alol in Hebrew, the effect to its cause, it's ilah. So that's the end of this section. I know the end got very esoteric and technical. Again, it's something you might want to just, if you're interested, you can like read it over a few times, listen to it a few times, try to take some notes. Maybe if nothing else, maybe it will make you curious about studying more deeper Chassadas. For example, the Mitchell Rebbe Shar Yechud V'Amunah is a good place to start, I would say, that really gets into these technicalities of the worlds and the spheros and the kelim, the external kelim, the internal kelim, the hechalos, the chambers, all of that stuff. It does get quite technical. Maybe it will give you an appreciation of just how vast this knowledge is. But the bottom line, really, that we want to bring out from today is the explanation as to how it is that we are able to exist or have a semblance of our own independent existence, in spite of the fact that we know that everything is really sourced in God and is really truly nullified to God and has no existence of its own other than God. So how can we feel that we do have our own independent existence, even if it's only from our perspective? Where does this come from? It must have a source within God. So today we explored that source, and we explored that that source is from the vessels, and we trace back, and specifically it's the vessels of the three lower worlds, and we trace those back to even the highest of all worlds, because everything comes from that higher world, that world of Atzilus, but it's within it's from the external aspect of the vessels within that world, which ultimately translate within the chambers of that world, which is a very external aspect of that world, and the angels of the world as well. So again, very technical today, but hopefully you did get at least the main message out of this, and we'll continue along these lines tomorrow, and I will speak to you then. Thanks for listening to the It Is Taught podcast, hosted by Sarit Switzer. This podcast is dedicated in loving memory of my maternal grandfather, Avraham Yitzchak ben Binyamin HaKohen of blessed memory. Music by Shoshana. If you enjoyed this episode and would like to support the show, please share it with others and subscribe on YouTube, Apple iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you listen to podcasts. And make sure to leave us a 5-star review. To find out more about the It Is Taught project, including more information on my soon-to-be published book, please visit our website, itistaught.com. To catch the latest from me, follow me on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Looking forward to speaking with you tomorrow, and until then, have a great day.